Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Edward Smaldone from the Aaron Copland School of Music. We're going to try to do two things really quickly here. The first thing is to talk about the basic voice leading that is possible. Not the only solution, but is possible when chords move. So what the idea is that you understand the basic voice leading. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the voice leading of chords playing 3 notes with the right hand and 1 note with the left. The voice leading is very, very similar, almost identical in fact, to what happens in about 90% of the Bach chorales. So this is not something that is separate from the way voice leading works in real music. The things that you need to remember are these 3 rules. There are 3, they're not rules, but they're things that happen an awful lot. When chords have a root that are a 4th or a 5th apart, they're the same thing. A 4th up is the same note as a 5th down. They'll have one common tone. And when the chords are a step apart, there are no common tones. And when the chords are a 3rd apart, they have 2 common tones. And you put that into practice like this. So this is a movement of a 5th. That's a movement of a step. That's a movement of a 4th. That's most of that. That's what numbers 1 and 2. What you have is a common tone. When you go from the C chord to the F chord, you leave the C where it is. When you go from the F chord to the G chord, there are no common tones. They all move down. When you go from the G chord to the C chord, there's a common tone and it stays right there. And you simply repeat that process in these other versions. I'm going to show this to you really quickly by switching my camera to the keyboard. And now you can see how it works on the piano. So 1 goes to 4, goes to 5, it goes back to 1. And that common tone pattern, that common tone relationship is maintained regardless of which version of the right hand I start with. One more point to remember: this is root position, this is root position, this is root position. They are all root position because the left hand is playing C down in the lowest voice. So all of that is a root position chord because the note in the bass didn't change. That's a very important concept to keep in mind. Now, the next possibility is when the chords move by a 3rd. And here you have a movement by a 3rd, and then another movement by a 3rd, then a movement by a step, then a movement by a 4th. So this progression actually has all of the possibilities that we're talking about. Down a 3rd, down another 3rd, down up a step, and then up a 4th. And when you go down a 3rd, there are 2 notes in common. When you go down another 3rd, it's these 2 notes that are in common. When you go up a step, they all go down. And when you go up a 4th, you can keep the common tone. And you'll notice that the rule also happens to say that when the chords are a 3rd apart, they'll have 2 common tones. You keep the common tone, and the other voice moves by step. This is pretty cool because if I go from a C chord down to an A chord, the note that is not held goes up in contrary motion to the bass. Well, if I had gone from an A chord up to a C chord, the same thing would have happened, except that instead of the voice, that G going up to A, the A would have gone down to G, and going down would be the contrary motion to the A going to C going up, if you read that backwards. Okay? And then there's one last progression I'd like to talk about, which is among the most famous in the world, and it illustrates one more concept. So we have down a 4th, up a step, down a 4th, up a step. So it's down a 4th, up a tooth, down a 4th, up a tooth. Then it's down a fourth, and this time it goes back up to the fourth, and then it goes up a step. Now, when it goes up a step, what I did here was I changed the disposition of the right hand. When you play, as I showed you before, when you play one chord, a single chord, that is, and you move it around like that, you're changing the voicing, but you're not changing the chord, and you're not changing the note that's in the bass, so you're not changing the position. These are all root position chords. It's what Pachelbel wrote. And the reason I did that was so that I could get from this chord to this chord, which gives me a nice common tone right back to the original chord without having to move things around. So I recommend that as a chord progression that you could try in other keys. Okay? Have some fun with that.